Hey up guys, it's Ricky here with a lesson all about fretboard navigation. What I'm going to get into is for those of you out there who are struggling to find the names of the notes on the fretboard, the alphabet letters that help us to memorize the notes on the fretboard and the starting points for root notes, for intervals, for our key centers, for chords, for scales and arpeggios. If you don't know your notes, then you are essentially lost. This is part one of a little series. If you watch this all the way to the end, there'll be a link there to another video which shows you how to link them up. But first things first, I have to show you how we derive these things called caged octaves. If you've never heard of the cage system, there's a video up here that talks about the cage system. I talk about that a lot, and it's a really cool way of understanding the guitar fretboard and how it works and how all the shapes link up into each other, because that's what happens. It's all about shapes and patterns that connect together. To learn the fretboard, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate using our 5 caged chords. We're going to look at these cowboy chords. If you know these because you're a beginner, or if you've been a guitarist for some time and you've played these chords for ages. These caged octaves are hidden within our 5 caged guitar chords. If you are struggling to find your way around still being an advanced player, then this can help you, because what we're doing is we're tapping into something that you already know. I always say the easiest way to go somewhere new is from somewhere you already know. Let's look at the first chord, the C major chord. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the root, third and fifth of these chords. If you didn't know these cage chords, they contain a root note, a third and a fifth. The root note is the home note, the third is the emotion note, and the fifth is transparent. That's what you need to know here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put those in there. That is our first root note for our C chord. When I put these other notes on here, you'll see that we get the third here, the fifth here, we get the root here again, we get another third here, and that's the anatomy of that C chord. And if you think about it, we don't play that note, but we're going to just highlight these two notes here, this root note here and this root note here. If you look at that shape there, you can see there's a pattern to that. If you were thinking about this as a grid reference on a map, you might say from this one you would go 1, 2, 3 strings and back 2 frets to find it. But the easiest way to find this is actually play the shape and take that middle finger out. What I'm going to do is we're going to transfer this down here so that you can see that. If I isolate that shape there, then what it means is you are better able to visualize that pattern. You can see that is the C-shaped octave. You can see where it's derived from this chord. We're going to carry on. We're going to do the next chord. The next chord we have is the A major. We know we have a root note here because it's an A chord and that's an open A string. We don't play an E string on an A chord. Let's get rid of that. Then the next note we have is we have the fifth. And let me just swap my pens because I was going to do these all with the red for root. There you go. And I'll just go over that there just to show that it is red for root. We get the third, put that circle there, and then we get another fifth up here. Right, what we're looking at here is we're looking at the pattern that we need to remember to find the octave here. And as you can see, it goes from the open A string here, we go up 2 frets and over 2 strings. If I just draw that line in there, up 2, over 2, I'm going to take this and I'm going to swap it down onto this chord box here so that it's nice and neat and easy for you to see. We've got the root, we go up 2 frets, and then we go over 2 strings. You can see that is going from the A string there to the G string. And you can see that is the octave. This one goes from the A string to the B string. The thing to notice with this is that the C shape and the A shape, these guys, they are 5 string chords. Because if you look at this, look, it starts on the A string and that chord is on the A, D, G, B and E string. And you can see the same thing applies here on the A shape here. The chord is on the A string, D string, G string, B string and E string. And it's worth noting that these sort of foundation root notes, if you will, the lowest sounding root note of this octave is going to be on the A string. It's just there for you. But the thing is, you might say to yourself, which one is it? And you'll see this when you get into the next lesson where we link these together, and you'll see that there's this beautiful pattern that is created by linking these shapes. You've guessed it, it is caged, and the next chord we're going to look at, we've gone C, A, and the next one is going to be G because we're using the caged acronym CAGED. This is the G shape. Let me just put in the root notes for this straight away, and then it's just going to be a lot easier for you to see how this works. What happens is you get good at doing this, using your eye to find out where these things are, but I think it's worthwhile putting these other notes in here. You can see the relationship of these notes and you can start to see these patterns. Put the fifth in here, and then the way I play my G is I play it with this extra octave here. That's another use case of this caged octaves idea. But what you can see here is that we have this triangle shape. This is a bit trickier, is this one, because it looks a bit similar to the C shape, but what you've got to do is you've got to go back another fret. We go over 4 strings and we go 1, 2, 3, back 3 frets. That's a way to look at it, but there is another way that we can do this, and this is probably my preferred way of doing it because this ties in with pentatonic scales and other lead orientated navigation methods. Let's take this and I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, and then I go over 2. Anything that's on this E string is mirrored on this other E string because they are both the same value. Let's extract that information there and we'll put it down here so that you can see this. So we take this root note here, we go back 3 frets, 1, 2, 3 frets on the G string, and this is why I think it's useful to see this as the G shape because it has a root note on the G string as well. This is what I would call the G shaped octave, this one here. Let's take this on here. You can see I go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and over 2 strings, and that's the shape that I end up getting. I'll get this one here and this one here. You can see there's 2 ways of looking at that. Now you might be thinking to yourself, how am I going to remember all this? Don't worry, this PDF will be in the video description down below. You can download that. Let me do the next shape. The next shape we are going to do is the E shape. Yes, we are just filling out that whole caged thing. Let's draw the chord in. We get a root here, we get the 5th, we get another root. I should do those in red, which I will do now. We got the root there. Then what happens is we get the 3rd, then we get the 5th, then we get another root because this root is mirrored as we go across from one E string to an E string, and that would make sense there, guys. This is a cool thing, and this is a comparison I want you to notice, is that if the guitar wasn't tuned the way it was, then a lot of the shapes would be the same. There would be less shapes for us to play, but the kink in that tuning is what makes these shapes all different to each other. But conveniently for us, because of the tuning of the guitar, if we look at how we get to this root note here from this root note, it means we go up 2 frets and then over 2 strings. That looks familiar. If you look at the A shape, you can see that this ends up being the same scenario. Taking that across there, you can see that we get that up 2, over 2, up 2, over 2. And I think that's probably the easiest way to see that. Now let me just separate that. I'm going to put this over here and we're going to say that root is there. Remember what I said? It was up 2 frets and then over 2 strings. That defines that shape there, and you can see it is exactly the same formula to get that as it is for the A-shaped octave. It's just on different strings. Before we go, let's just get this. You can see that the G shape, well, the G shape uses all 6 strings, and so does the E shape. They use all 6 strings, which is why we have 3 root notes in that G chord and we have 3 root notes in the E chord. Let me just finish this one off here. You can see we've got that root to root there. We can look at this one over here. Now, I like to see this as well because it shows you how elegant and beautiful the fretboard works. If you remember our C-shaped octave, it went 1, 2, 3, and then back 2. But if we look at the same thing, we go 1, 2, 3, and back 2. We get the same shape as the C shape there. It's another easy way to look at it. These shapes, they repeat themselves. It's just noticing them and visualizing them. Where this crosses over from the E string to the E string, this is where it gets repeated here in this E shape. We've got to account for all that there. Now, I mentioned that these 2 chords use 6 strings. They use 6 strings, and we want to put that there. We want to understand that this is 6 strings, therefore we're going to have 3 root notes, whereas this one uses 5 strings and we're going to end up with 2 root notes. So that means that we we only have one shape left, guys, and that shape is going to be, you've guessed it, the D shape. We don't use the E string, we don't use the A string. We only use 4 strings in this shape, and this is a cool thing that you need to really understand, which is why I explained it down here, that the C and the A shapes, they use 5 strings, the G and the E shapes use 6 strings, the D shape doesn't share strings with any other chord shape. If we look at that, we've got a root note there in that open position. We get the 5th here, we get the root here, switch my pen again, and we get the 3rd here. It looks like a B, but it is a number 3, trust me. What you can see here is there's this one, because there are less strings, we only get 2 root notes. Let's do the formula for this one. We can see that it goes up 1, 2, 3 frets, and then what we do is we go over 2 strings. Look at that. Look at how that coincides with the G shape. You can think to yourself that the G shape and the D shape there, they use the same octave formula, up 3 frets over 2 strings. It's almost like how chess pieces move, and this is actually probably how I came up with this idea of trying to map it out and thinking about how the knight might move on a chessboard. Let's put this D-shaped octave here. We're going to start on the D string because it's a D-shaped octave, and that's the thing, it's always going to give you the name of the octave. Look, we've got the root note here, and then we do that little formula, we go up 3 over 2, and that helps us to find that octave pattern, and that's the D-shaped octave there, guys. It's a really useful way to do it. This is 4 strings and it's got 2 roots in that octave pattern as well. Now we've got that, and let me just put these arrows in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we extracted that information from those cowboy chords, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you these caged octave patterns on the guitar fretboard, and I'll talk you through it so you can actually see them in action. If you are enjoying my lessons here on YouTube, you might consider supporting my work on the channel and purchasing my ultimate guitar lesson book, which has got 80 lessons that are here on my YouTube channel. Let's get back to the video. The first shape we're going to apply this to, the C-shaped octave. Let's just put that C chord on, and what we'll do is we'll extract the notes that we don't need and leave the octaves, and that means that I end up with my first finger on the B string at the 1st fret, and then my 3rd finger here on the A string. Now what you can see is if I play these here, this is going to be a C, and this is going to be a C. Now this is a cool way of navigating your way around if you know your A string, but if you don't know the names of your notes on your B string, then what you can do is you can use this C-shaped octave to help you to define what this note is on the B string. If I take this note here, C, this is going to be C. So if I move that up 1 fret there, up a half step, that's a C sharp. So by default, that's going to be a C sharp as well. And I can work this backwards. If I play this note here and I'm trying to figure out what it is, I go, oh, what is that note? I just play the C shape, and then I can visualize my A string better. Is why I say learn your E string and your A strings first. Then I can find out that note there is a D, and by default I know that is a D as well. We're reverse engineering this whole thing. So I can do this with any note as long as I know my musical alphabet. Up my A string, for instance, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Take that G there. That's how I would find a G on the B string. What about an E here? Well, let me take that E here and imagine I was playing a pentatonic scale here. If I want to repeat that whole same thing again, I ran out of strings there, but hopefully you'll see that I was just playing the pentatonic there, guys. It's really useful to be able to see this idea here, and we can do this with the other shapes, which brings me on to the next shape, which is the A shape. This is the A shape that we know and love, and remember we had an open A string in this. I'm going to take everything off that I don't need and leave the octave. So I've got this open A string and I've got the 2nd fret on this G string here. I'm thinking to myself up 2 over 2. So I've got up 2 frets over 2 strings. If I take that up a half step, that's a B flat or an A sharp. You can see I'm doing exactly the same thing. So there is that caged octave, and this is a B, this is a C, this is a D. Look at that pentatonic idea that I played earlier. I went like this. I did exactly the same thing there. So it means I can access things I know already and just put them in a different part of the fretboard really easy by leveraging these caged octaves. The next shape is the G shape. If we look at this, I've got this G on the E string here, and I've also got it mirrored on my thin E string because E strings mirror each other. Whatever happens on this one is happening on this one as well. And we also have an open G there as well. Remember, I told you we're 3 Gs, not the B Gs. That's a different thing completely. So there's the 3 Gs that we have there. How does that work if I want to move this up? If I take this up to an A note here, I can go back 1, 2, 3 frets and over 4 strings. It's a little harder to see as that one, but this is the super convenient one because this is already on the G string. If you know this is your G string, you just move it up. You go G, A, B. Let's try this here from this B here. And I know that I go 1, 2, 3 and over 2 to find that note. So let's do that. There you go. A little out of tune there. There's the G-shaped octave. This thing moves all around the place, guys. There's the B. There's a C note. I know where that is. So this is going to help me to find those scales and those chords and all that other good stuff as well. Moving on to the next shape that we have, which is the other 6-string chord shape, which is the E shape. We've got our trusty E chord on 5, R3 there. And we've got a root on this open E string, and remember, if it's on this open E string, it's repeated on the thin E string. So we've got that baby there, but inside the chord, because I talk about this 5R3 thing a lot, 5R, there's our third root. So we've got 3 roots in the E chord. Notice it sounds very stable because it has 3 root notes, and root note is the note of resolution. Yeah, let's look at this one. And like I say, this was like the A shape. It goes up 2 frets and over 2 strings. So that's an easy one for us to find. Let's do it here on this F. If I want to find F on the octave here, which is going to be on the D string, I go up 2, over 2, F to F here. F sharp. We've got F sharp there. We've got G here. I've got to be really careful with that because I may accidentally play a 1970s disco bass line. You know what I'm saying. So that's the E-shaped octave. But remember, we had this other way of joining it across because remember, E string to E string, and we got that going on there. But if we take this root note here, then we can link it across there. Let me just show you what I meant about this being like the C shape there. It doesn't sound like a C, by the way. Don't play it. It sounds disgusting. What we do is we take this chord here, and then what we do is we just move it over, and you can see that it's that C shape. But generally, what I tend to do is I just join them up like this. Use all 3 and then you can see them and you can see how they interlock with each other. So that's pretty awesome. We've got one more shape to do. We've got the D chord here. Remember we had the open D string, which is a D because this is the D-shaped octave. And this is where these names for these octave shapes are derived from. So we've got this one and we know that it's just like that G shape. We know that it goes up 3 frets and over 2 strings. So if I play the open D string and this 3rd fret on the B string, I can hear that is exactly the same note. Now, if you're having trouble listening and knowing what it is, if you just sing hi-ho in your head or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the first 2 notes of that. Hi-ho. That is the D shape. That is all 5 of those caged octave shapes. I've shown you where they come from and I've also showed you how to play them. And if that isn't cool enough, what I'll do is I'll show you how to link them so that you can really connect them all up. Click here to watch this next lesson on how to join them all up.